and know what your number means to you.
KFAA TV 51 Rogers. Some episodes of the Jessy Rafael Show contain mature subject matter. Parental discretion with children's viewing habits is always advised.
Was crowned Miss America 1959, her future never looked brighter. After all, winning the title meant she could do anything, go anywhere, but that chance in a lifetime was almost shattered when she became deathly ill with a disease that has no cure. Now, 30 years later, actress Marianne Mobley is here with us, and she's going to reveal how she beat her painful illness and never gave up hope. At the Republican convention last summer, the Bush family certainly had a lot to celebrate. Not only had George Bush won the nomination, more importantly, their youngest son, Marvin, had just beaten his battle against a debilitating disease. Today, Marvin Bush offers inspiration and hope to everyone who suffers a painful illness. As number 6 with the San Diego Chargers, place kicker Rolf Benirschke was irreplaceable. In fact, even after he became gravely ill, Rolf continued to play. But when his weight dropped to only 123 pounds, he thought his football career was over. But he also beat his illness and went on to play until he retired in 1987. Today, Rolf Benirschke hosts a daytime version of Wheel of Fortune. Please welcome all 3 of our guests. That all 3 of our guests suffer from a debilitating disease called ileitis colitis that affects over 2 million of the people who are watching us now. Rolf, suppose we start with you. What happened when you first got sick? What did it do to your life? How did it affect you?
Well, it came at a terrible time. It was my second season in the NFL, 1978. Very excited about my future in the business. I'd had some success my rookie season, and here for the first time I was feeling like I belonged. When suddenly I became really ill. I had severe abdominal crampiness. I had intense diarrhea. I had fever, nauseousness. And as a son of a physician, I went to my dad and said, you know, Dad, what's the deal? And we figured it was some kind of food poisoning. But it progressed, and it went day after day after day. And finally, after a week of this, we said, we got to find out what the deal is. So I went to a physician, and I was diagnosed at the time as having Crohn's disease, which is one of the inflammatory bowel diseases you discussed that we don't understand. We don't know how you get it, and we don't know a cure. And how it affects a person goes from one end of the spectrum to the other. One end being you have the illness that comes once, it may last 2 or 3 weeks, and it may go into remission for the rest of your life. To the other end of the spectrum where you may need surgery or repeated surgeries. As an athlete who was excited about his future, I decided I was going to be in that first category. This was going to go away any day, and I can resume my career.
And you'd never have it again the rest of your life.
Right. Unfortunately, I was the other extreme. I was somebody that became continually more ill. I played the season in 1978, but by the end of the season, I would play the game on Sunday. I would go into the hospital Sunday night. I would get hooked up to an IV tube, be fed intravenously the entire week, would get released for the game on Sunday, would play and go back in the hospital.
How could anybody have, you know, that happen, be dropping weight and have the strength? I think of football taking a lot of strength.
I was fortunate. I guess I can say I was fortunate. I was a kicker, and so I did not need to have the daily contact and the big, massive strength that a lot of football players need. My job was more dependent on rhythm and timing, and you can still do that even when you're little. Ironically, when you look at my career, I had the best year of my career during that illness.
When you were ill? Can you define the disease for us?
It's an inflammation of the intestine, and we don't know how you get it. It turns out that I was actually misdiagnosed. In fact, I didn't have Crohn's disease, but I had ulcerative colitis, but we weren't going to find that out for another 3 years.
How does it hurt, first of all?
It hurts intensely. It hurts particularly after you eat. As your digestion and your gut begins to peristalse, you begin to have pain because the lining of your intestine is inflamed, in fact, ulcerated at different parts. So as food passes down it, you have severe abdominal cramps to where, I mean, I couldn't button my jeans, and I had a hard time buttoning my football pants. So it was very difficult.
Did you then play another season? It was your best, and then did you give up football? What happened to your
What
life?
happened was, during that off season, I tried every cure that you read about. As things were written about my illness, people would share their story and what helped them. And
Like what did you try? You try health foods? You
Sally,
try
I
exercise?
tried the whole gamut, from all different kinds of food, from low fiber to high fiber, to a strict amino acids, to low fats, to no fats, to vegetables, to locking yourself in a room with Groucho Marx films for the weekend and hope that works. I mean, when you're really ill, you try different things. Unfortunately, nothing worked. But I didn't know what else to do. So I continued to play the next season. But unfortunately, 4 games into it, I collapsed on a flight home from New England and was revived. I had 103 fever at the time, was taken to the hospital, and it was then that my football career, for the moment certainly, and from my way of thinking, forever, was over.
Okay, when they diagnosed it, they did in the hospital finally, not Crohn's disease, but ileitis colitis?
Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are very similar illnesses. They symptomatically affect you in the same way. The difference is in the pathology of the infection and the illness.
Did you think that was it?
What happened was, ultimately, not for my life, but ultimately became a situation like that. What happened was I needed to go to the hospital for surgery. They gave me 2 weeks to sort of build my strength up to prepare for the surgery. Again, I collapsed in the hospital. They did an emergency surgery 6 days after being admitted. There were complications during the surgery because I had waited for so long.
Uh-huh.
I needed to go back in 6 days later and operate once again. And now I'm critically ill. I mean, now I'm 120 pounds. And I'm fighting to survive every day as I have massive peritonitis and an infection that has sort of taken over my body. Fortunately, I was in a hospital that had good infectious disease division, and they were able to sort of stem the tide and begin to get me back healthy. But I woke up with an ileostomy that I would wear for the next 3.5 years.
What's an ileostomy?
An ileostomy is a bag that collects your waste. They had to take out my colon, and so they divert your small intestine out through a little opening in your side, and you have to wear an appliance to collect your waste.
What does that feel like? I mean, mentally, I know what it feels like.
Well,
but mentally.
At the time, I have to tell you that I was just trying to survive.
You didn't care as long as you lived.
I didn't think I was going to wake up the next day. But as I slowly got better, then the question was, what do you do with your life, and how does this change it? For me, the happiness I derived from life was athletics. You know, I ski, I play tennis, I play ice hockey.
Can you do that with the pouch?
Absolutely.
You can?
To finish the story, as I got better, and as I began to sort of decide what was important to me and try those things, I realized that I wanted to try to play football again. And with the help of my teammates and my family particularly, I worked myself back into shape and competed for my job and earned my spot back on the Chargers. And ended up playing with an ileostomy then for 3.5 years before I had surgery that actually allowed me to get rid of that. But I never thought that was going to happen. I figured I was going to play the rest of my life with the appliance, and was very happy to do that. Just actually thrilled to be alive.
So that's about as happy an ending, I guess, as you can hear.
There are a lot of things that you go through when you're sitting there at death's door wondering if you're going to wake up. And having come full circle now and being able to look back at that retrospectively, I can tell you very honestly that I wouldn't trade what I've learned. Because
you would not even trade no matter how painful and everything, you wouldn't, it's made a better man of you, McGee.
It sounds so cliche.
I know, but it's true, isn't it?
You live life very differently now. I mean, the things that are important to you are very clearly defined. And you make sure and live in the present and not plan always for 5 or 10 years down the road, because, as I know, you may not get there.
I need to learn that, as a matter of fact. When we return, Marianne Mobley and Marvin Bush will be right back.
Think of your hands and think of a name. For years, it's healed and restored rough, dry skin. Now there's something more. Announcing new, improved Vaseline Intensive Care. An even better formula with more healing ingredients. It heals rough, dry skin fast. So when you think of your hands, think of our name. New, improved Vaseline Intensive Care Lotion. Now with even more healing ingredients.
This is a Newsline 2451 News Digest.
Coming up on the early edition of news, Fort Smith officials worry about broken water pipes and water pressure. A person matching the description of a man wanted for a shooting in Sallisaw is spotted again today. And Western Arkansas sees another big drug bust. This time, it's crank. Good afternoon, I'm Chris Petty. Join Jennifer Ogle, Chris Parsons, Mike Nail, and me for Newsline 2451 at 6 o'clock.
There's something over there. You can't get anywhere. Where the best food in town meets the best price around. It's easy to tell this is a new Taco Bell.
You can't beat our delicious original tacos at Taco Bell, where the best food meets an even better price.
Make a run for the border.
39-cent tacos and free drink refills at Taco Bell.
Catch the best sports coverage around on Newsline 2451. Beginning Thursday, the voice of the Razorbacks, Mike Neal, will be your ticket to the best seats in the house with live reports from Las Vegas as the basketball Razorbacks take on nationally ranked UNLV. And join Keith Isbell live in Dallas, Texas, as the 10th-ranked Arkansas Razorbacks prepare for the 8th-ranked Volunteers of Tennessee in the 1990 Cotton Bowl. We're going that extra mile for you. Newsline 2451.
Today is going to be a learning experience, especially for me. Ileitis and colitis are two different diseases, right? And Marianne Mobley, you suffer from Crohn's disease.
Crohn's disease or ileitis.
It's the same.
Ileitis because generally it affects the ileum, the small and the small intestines. Crohn's disease because it's named for the doctor who first diagnosed it. My symptoms are the same as Rolf's. The pain, the fever, the chills, the diarrhea. I had left Broadway and was under contract to MGM and was having a wonderful career. But in 1962, I had the same symptoms and I was put into the hospital and we did all sorts of tests and they couldn't find a cause. But they said, we're going to try one last thing. And they came back and said to me, you have ileitis. There is no cure. We don't know what causes it. But you should be able to live a normal life. However, generally this affects you up until the age of 30. If you survive past the age of 30, the chances are you will not get it for whatever cause. But I would spend about a week every year in the hospital with an IV in my arm. But I would will myself to keep going, and I never missed but one day of work since I was diagnosed as having Crohn's disease. Now, I am very fortunate because I've been in remission for whatever reason for 15 years. But I went through a series of about, 10 years of the most intense pain. My husband married me knowing that I had this illness.
Can I
And he
interrupt?
was a
Gary
great-
Collins is her
yes.
husband who's going to be joining us a little bit later.
And
he knew you had the disease
He
when you
knew
married.
that I had this illness. He knew what I was facing, and he loved me anyway, which says a lot about my husband. But the thing that really depressed me was that I had a doctor who said to me every time I had an attack, we should operate. Well, generally in Crohn's disease, if you have an operation, in 45 to 55% of the cases, it returns. Even though colitis is much more severe, you have a better chance of being cured with a colostomy than someone in my case because it is generally diffused throughout the intestinal tract.
Okay, we got to stop. A colostomy is what you... I'm going to
When
hit
you
you on
have
every one of these technical
the bag
things.
on the outside.
The pouch on the outside is called having a colostomy.
Yes.
There you
well,
go.
Now,
There are
Rock,
two kinds of pouches. There's an ileostomy and a colostomy. They provide the same function. It just depends where they actually come out, whether it's the ileum or the colon that brings you, is brought out.
I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure.
The other significant difference is that with ulcerative colitis, once you have surgery and you have your entire colon taken out, you are cured. because the disease is restricted to the colon. Whereas in ileitis or Crohn's disease,
I am not cured.
You are not cured. Now,
I am
let's
not cured, but I am in remission. But I must tell you, for everyone watching at home, always get a second opinion before you have surgery.
Or a third.
Or a third, because I had a doctor who kept saying that I should have surgery. And he depressed me so that finally I went to a new doctor, and he said, Marianne, look, we're going to beat this. He said, you don't have an operation unless you hemorrhage, or you have a blockage, or there's a major reason to have surgery. Now, my daughter was 2 years old, and I lost half of my body's blood.
How? Now tell me about that. It would be interesting for somebody to know about that day. What happened?
You can bleed internally and not know about it until you become so weak that you just can't keep going. And I was becoming weaker and weaker, not knowing that I was bleeding internally. And finally, I went into the bathroom, and I don't know how to say it very politely, but there's a reason why we're here today, and that's to help those who are watching out across America.
Suppose somebody had that exact moment happen to them. They wouldn't know. I wouldn't know what it was.
Well, you can have
half
it for other reasons, but for me, I was hemorrhaging, and half of my body's blood was lost within an hour's period of time. I went into my husband and I said, I'm hemorrhaging, and passed out on the floor. He picked me up in his arms and he put me on the bed, called my doctor, and the doctor said, get her to the hospital immediately. Shall I send an ambulance? And Gary said, no, I think we can get her there faster. We put our 2-year-old daughter in the front seat, and he had to pry my fingers, and I don't mean to sound dramatic, but I want you to know what can happen. We had to pry my fingers off of the bed because I said to my husband, I am dying and I don't want to leave you and our daughter. And I felt as though I was slipping away. What I was doing was going into shock. But I knew in my heart I was dying. They got me to the hospital. As soon as they had put so many pints of blood in me, I was fine, and I went home the next day.
Oh!
But had I been home alone, I would have died.
Now, you also had a time when the maid found you, is that
Yes,
correct?
when I was single, I had just finished a Jerry Lewis picture. I'd done a movie called 3 on a Couch with Jerry Lewis and Janet Leigh. And I could go to work, and I would do the same thing that would happen to Rolf. After work, I would go into the hospital and be fed intravenously, which allows the intestinal tract to quiet down. But I became so toxic that I could no longer reach for the phone. Nothing could go down. Of course, everything was coming up, and I was dehydrated, and the maid found me. They called the doctor. He rushed immediately to our house. I had a doctor that would make house calls.
The last one?
Yes, absolutely. But he did an amazing thing. He rushed me to the hospital, and he had a surgeon stand by. I had a blockage. Nothing was going down. Everything was coming up. But he did a wonderful thing. He said, I want you to stand by. I want you to be on call, because I'm going to try to remove this blockage with a tube. So they put a tube down my nose into the intestinal tract and left it there for 4 days. The surgeon was always on call in case this did not work. But it worked, and I didn't have to have surgery. But that was because I had a very good doctor.
Which we have to say how many, you know, it's a matter
Absolutely.
of... What about you, Marvin?
Well, I got sick in 1985, and...
That's fairly recent.
4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was 29 years old.
See, he just missed, excuse me, but he just missed the cutoff. 30 is about it.
That's right. That's right. I should have hung in another year. I would have been all right.
Yeah.
Where were you when I needed you?
Oh, honey, I was just waiting for a call.
What were you doing at the time? What was your life like?
I'm a businessman.
Mm-hmm.
Had been married for 5 years and had been healthy and was fairly athletic.
Very athletic. Very good tennis player. Don't let him understate it.
Yes, he is.
Pretty athletic and very happy. And what happened, it was interesting. When I realized I was really sick, might have something, serious wrong with me, was I was up in Maine with my parents on a vacation in Kennebunkport, Maine. And it was the weekend that President Reagan, that the news came out that he had colon cancer.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember, in 1985, he was really sick. And I was sort of watching the television, and it had some of the symptoms that Rolf had described earlier about being, had some diarrhea and was fatigued and would get real tired. And the doctors came on, the experts came on the television and started pointing, you know, with the pointers and showing you all sorts of pictures of intestines and pointing out all the different symptoms. And while my mom and dad were worried about President Reagan and Mrs. Reagan for obvious reasons, I was over on the other end of the couch worrying about myself. I started thinking, uh-oh.
Had you ever told them that you were not?
Of course not. I grew up with 3 older brothers. And if you know, sort of having a screen door slammed in my face my entire life. And, and I sort of, why do you think I was the last guy to talk here? I was very quiet.
No, they say
very quiet and patient.
No. She saved the best for last.
No, that's not true. But
wait a minute. We're going to continue with Marvin's story. I'm sorry, Marvin. Not only the third, but
Slam that door one more time.
Slammed the screen door, and you're going to meet Gary Collins, who saved Mary Ann Mobley's life. Her husband, when we return.
It's called Drixoral, a powerful 12-hour cold medicine that at one time you couldn't buy without a doctor's prescription. Today you can. Drixoral works just as hard against colds as it always did. You just don't have to work so hard to get it. 12-hour prescription strength Drixoral. You don't need a prescription, just a cold. Now Drixoral also comes in a 12-hour non-drowsy formula.
I would never have believed it until one night I woke up around 3 o'clock in the morning. I felt something cold against my shoulder. It was the ceiling. I was looking down at my own body.
Doesn't make any sense to me. I wouldn't believe it for a second.
I don't know. I dreamt something once and it came true the next day. Maybe there is something to it.
It's all just coincidence. That's what I think.
I was thinking of my childhood friend the other day. I hadn't thought of her for years. Then all of a sudden the phone rings, and it's her. You tell me that's coincidence?
There's a word for it, the paranormal, and it's one of the biggest issues of our age. Now, Time Life Books brings you Mysteries of the Unknown that looks into every area, from ESP to precognition to alien encounters, to give you all the sides.
I'm a scientist. I'm willing to be open-minded. But in my profession, we live by positive proof.
I still say it's mass hysteria.
My daughter didn't want to get on that school bus. I didn't know why. But something told me to take her seriously. I'm glad I did.
Even if just some of these things are real, do you know what that would mean?
Here in one place are the newly researched facts, first-person reports, and scientific experiments, so you can decide for yourself. There are so many hints of a world more remarkable than we ever imagined. If you've ever wondered about the unknown, examine your first volume for 10 days free and take a serious look at a world that can no longer be ignored.
I never thought I would believe in it until it happened to me.
To order your first book, Mystic Places, call 1-800-252-5600. Examine it for 10 days. Keep it and pay just $12.99 plus shipping and handling. Other books will follow, one about every other month. Keep only the ones you want. Cancel anytime. Call 1-800-252-5600.
Now is Dr. David Sackar. He is a gastroenterologist who specializes in these diseases at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. But before we get to that point, I would like Mary Ann Mobley to please introduce, there's a gentleman sitting next to her. I thought it might be fun for her to tell you who it is.
Thank you. He is my husband, my friend. He is the father of our 20-year-old daughter. And he's was the Emmy Award-winning host of our magazine, but most of all, he's a man who helped me survive, and I think I'm cured from a very debilitating illness.
Who is he?
Not me.
Gary Collins.
Right? Say the name. Okay, now I apologize. We closed the screen door on you.
No sweat.
No, I'm not going to do that because they used to do it to me. We were in the middle of the story. When we left you, you were on the sofa. Now, my thought is watching Reagan's diagram of his health of colon cancer. Now, didn't you feel maybe I'm just being hypochondriac attitude about
That's exactly what I felt. And as a result, when I got back home to Virginia, I totally ignored the symptoms, and particularly
what were the symptoms?
Well, the symptoms were I was fatigued, and I was bleeding, bleeding in my stools, had diarrhea. I was going to the bathroom 3 or 4 times more than I normally would in a typical day, and I tried to ignore them. I built up a wall of denial, basically. And then I saw a news story that said something to the effect that doctors across America are being deluged with patients who, want to have the same disease the president has. And so there have been so many false alarms that, I just sort of one of these people who tries to get along. And I didn't want to cause any additional problems for the good doctors out there. And so I ignored the symptoms as long as I could. And ultimately, to make a long story short, I ended up in the hospital about 6 or 7 months later. And like Rolf, I had, it got to a point where it was an emergency. My surgery, I didn't have a choice. I lost, I guess, 40 or 50 pounds and had, like Rolf and Marianne, been fed intravenously and really didn't have a clue as to what was going on to me. And I woke up in the hospital room and had an ileostomy. I have one right now. I wear a pouch around my waist.
Did they say, do you want to have this, or did they just do it?
Honey, I didn't have much of a choice.
You were bye-bye land, and you
At that point, I didn't know what was going on. I had tubes coming all I didn't know what was going on. And so when I woke up, that was a pretty sweet sensation. Opening my eyes and seeing my family around me, it was a pretty darn good feeling. So I didn't really worry about, at that point, I didn't know what was going on. I had a lot of time by myself in the hospital room to sort of reflect on what this thing was hanging there. And it's a very frustrating feeling. And, through the support of friends and people like Rolf who were kind enough to call and tell me that it doesn't represent the end of your life. Instead, it's sort of a new chapter of good health. This, to me, represents good health. Because I can go out there and do anything that anybody in this room can do.
Including play tennis?
He beat Chris Everett? He did. He beat Chris Everett.
And Pam Shriver.
And Pam Shriver.
But don't tell any. Yeah, my brother played in that match too. But don't tell it. I'm not supposed to talk about that.
He beat Chris Everett and Pam Shriver.
Don't be a blabbermouth. He didn't want you to tell. Don't be a blabbermouth.
Well, she got my memo, obviously, before the...
We had made a bet on it as well.
Listen, if I beat him, I'd taken a sign.
He's a fabulous athlete is the point, and he can
so
literally
that's what
do
keeps going. Let me get to Gary.
Right.
Gary, there are people who are involved with, married to children, parents of people with these diseases. Can you speak to that? What is it?
Well,
What's
first
the
of all,
thought? What should they need to know?
Let me congratulate these 3 people as well as the doctor. Let me commend their courage for being here. This disease has some very unflattering side effects, and it has been kept in the closet for so long, people don't want to come forward. And one of the difficulties that you have is, for all intents and purposes, the appearance of the sufferer is as normal as that person sitting next to you. And the emotional disability or debilitating effect is such that they carry around a lot of guilt. And when they can't go to places, can't go to dinners, can't go to vacations, can't leave the bed for a week, can't do all the normal things that families do together, the guilt starts to pile up and pile up. And as a spouse, as Marianne indicated to you earlier, I didn't care what she had. I was in love with this woman, and I would have married her no matter what. And I didn't really fully understand what the disease was until these periods of time would happen to our family and our lifestyle where we were paralyzed.
Like in what? I mean, how would it work? You're a family of 3.
We'd get all dressed up, get all packed, get ready to go on a vacation, and Marianne would just sit down on the bed and say, I can't go.
Oh.
We'd get ready to go to work. She said, I can't go. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? Call the producer? She said, no, I've got to try to go. So she'd lay on the back seat of the car, and we'd drive to Universal Studios, where she was working. And I'd say, are you sure you want to do this? She says, I have to do this. And somehow, she would will herself, even though she was chronically ill, and I mean ill at that time, running a fever, she would will herself to go in there and sort of suspend the illness for the time it took for her to do her job.
Didn't that make you catatonic?
No.
I mean, you're watching her work and knowing you're the one who
I'm there waiting for the pieces to fall and hopefully catch them before they hit the ground. And I happened to be home at that particular time when she had her hemorrhage. But I think that's an important side of this which I can speak to. And that
then
is
how do you cope with it?
Well, now I don't have a problem with it because she's been in remission. There are times when stress, we kind of know what'll trigger it. So you have to sort of dance on eggshells once in a while when you get into situations, as all families do, where there's a problem, there's a little dissent, there's some kind of an area of concern. So you have to be careful. And you always have to remember that you don't want to carry something so far that it might trigger not a full-fledged attack, but certainly the preliminary stages. But she's been very fortunate, and so have I. But I think it's important that you recognize that you as the spouse can play a big role in how she sees herself in the disease and how we see ourselves together and how we can manage it.
And the doctor, because the turning point, I am convinced, in my illness was when I went to a new doctor and he said, hey, no big deal. Now, maybe it is, but he didn't need to tell me. And his attitude changed my attitude. And I said, this is it. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that I'm fortunate because my disease was not colitis. It's much easier, I think, for me to say, this is it. I went out, I did Circus of the Stars, I worked 30 feet in the air, and it maybe took a little more out of me to do it. But what I want your audience to know is that whether you have colitis or ileitis, it doesn't end your life. Not if you handle it right, you can do anything. And I'm living proof, so
I think that's the message, Sal. You know, we happen to be visible people up here, and because of that, we're on your show, but there are people in this audience, and there are 2 million people in the country who have the same illness and who can tell the same story.
Are you married?
No, I'm single.
Talk to...
Just the day.
But just as Marianne had to tell Gary that she had that disease, assuming that a lady you might marry is not watching us right now, there comes a point. Have you thought about, do you tell people you go out with about this, or what do you do?
Absolutely. I'm very upfront about it. I think the upside of my struggle was that because of the visibility of the NFL, I've been able to redirect the attention that's focused on me to the National Foundation for Ileitis and Colitis and spreading the word about these diseases. The point is that we've talked about very dramatic stories, but people live with this illness and do just fine with proper physician help and medical care.
We should have the doctor put this into perspective.
Well, I think we're really learning at least 4 important lessons here this morning, listening to these kinds of conversations. The first is that these are diseases that strike young people right at the thresholds of their most productive time, their productive career. As Marianne put it pretty well, these are diseases of childhood, teenage, 20s, and up to about 30 or so.
3-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 9-year-olds.
That's right. So here's one thing we learn, is that it strikes people when they're just really at the threshold of productivity. But the second thing we've learned is it's not something to be ashamed of. There's no need for this wall of denial that Marvin talked about. We don't get used too much to talking about abdominal cramps and bowels and diarrhea and stuff like that. Maybe it's not glamorous, but it's something we don't have to be ashamed about. It's something we can be open about, talk about, because we can handle it. I guess a third lesson we've learned here is that people can help themselves. Look at what you've seen here in terms of how people are working to help themselves with a will and an attitude to help overcome it.
You know, when I hear you talk about it, I'm like Marvin. I get the disease of the month. If I were watching this show, I would have that disease because I get every disease that I see on television.
I think a lot of us do.
Sure, you could. And you've got 5 more years before you're 30 anyhow. So
that's right. Oh, well said.
take a break, because I love holding on to those compliments, and then we'll be right back.
This is me, Gail Mercurio, before Nutrisystem. And this is me after Nutrisystem. I lost 160 pounds and I feel beautiful. I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, to feel beautiful again. And I knew I could, and I did it. After I lost weight, my mother saw me and she looked at me and she cried and she hugged me and she says, "Oh, I have my beautiful girl back."
Call Nutrisystems today and lose all the weight you want for just $169.
It's the most highly acclaimed movie of the year. The Little Mermaid is an instant classic, says Good Morning America. 2 thumbs up, rave Siskel and Ebert. You missed this and you'll never forgive yourself, says ABC TV. The Little Mermaid, rated G, now playing at a theater near you. And from Touchstone Pictures, Blaze is hot. It's one of the year's 10 best, raves Gannett. Raucous and enjoyable, says the LA Times. And too good to pass up, hails Newsweek. It's Blaze and it's hot. Rated R, now playing at a theater near you.
America's favorite love nest is Empty Nest. It's a love nest of warmth.
What's this?
Still life with more on it.
Well, that was touching. A love nest of surprises.
Daddy, you'll never guess what happened to me.
A neighborly love nest.
I didn't realize you could hear it all the way down the street.
Hear it and rearrange my liver spots.
But best of all, a love nest full of laughs. Empty Nest.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's a regular mirth fest.
Tell me, what is in? Everybody, I want to know. In, yeah. Oh, what is in? Ooh, yeah. What is in? Everybody, tell me, I got to know. What is in? What's in?
My daughter has Crohn's, and when she has attacks, she feels that she can hear gurgling in her stomach. Now, is that a common thing, or?
It's a very common thing. It's
Very
because this disease tends to cause partial blockages in the intestinal
that's what she
pathway.
has.
And as those intestinal contents try to get past that swollen, obstructed, inflamed area, it makes a lot of noise. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's part of the process.
Does it help you to, I know Mom's now a wreck. We got Mom over here. You're all right? Does it help you to Marianne, you want to talk to this young lady?
Oh, yes, because we have the same thing. Also, don't feel concerned, because once you start to healing, scar tissue can form. So your regular size of your intestinal tract may be that size, and scar tissue can close it off. So you can sometimes be laying face down on the bed, and you can feel the spasming through there. There's nothing wrong with that generally. I'm not the doctor, but that is a normal feeling because you have just, the scar tissue has closed the opening of the intestinal tract.
It's kind of fun. You wonder where it is.
Yes, yes.
I love having you are the doctor in a way. I mean,
well, I think it's important to us to know our own bodies.
You gotta
read
understand
about
yourself.
it, learn about it. We're all intelligent people, every one of us.
I don't know, did she answer that, Sally, whether it made a difference to her that we were here?
Yeah, no, she
good.
didn't. Did it make a difference when you see people like this? Does it matter?
It matters a lot. I was diagnosed when I was 16, and at that time, no one has heard of Crohn's disease, and I think it's great that it's more out in the open now.
And it does matter when you see people, because you can identify.
We have you to thank.
This is Lois Fink. And Lois says that she has suffered from Crohn's disease all of her life. But as a teenager, just like you, no one would believe just how sick she really was, not even her own mother. What did your mother think the problem was, and what did she want to do for you?
In the beginning, Sally, my mother thought I was constipated. I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I had stomach cramps all the time. And mothers back in those days, what was the common remedy? An enema.
Oh, dear.
And later on, she would take me, you know, from doctor to doctor. At 14, I was discovered to have had a hemorrhoid. They did surgery. They found internal hemorrhoids as well. Nobody thought to think, why would a child of 14 have hemorrhoids? At 15, I started to have what the doctors called an intestinal symptom, which presented as fevers, diarrhea, nausea. I was treated with antibiotics and phenobarbital. I only weighed about 86 pounds. My mother was frustrated. She tried to bribe me to eat by saying, if you could just get to 90 pounds, I'll get you that mohair sweater that's enraged. Nothing worked. At 16, I wasn't developing normally. I didn't have any signs of a period. I had no breast development. I'd been wearing padded bras for about a year. I faked a sinus infection because I was so embarrassed to undress in front of the rest of my girl classmates and have them see that I had no breast development, no nothing. My fevers and diarrhea and cramping got a lot worse. She took me to another doctor who was very brutal in doing a sigmoidoscopy, and he announced to my mother, there's nothing wrong with your daughter. She's just nervous, it's in her head, and if she doesn't watch it, she's a good candidate for colitis. So my mother started to have talks with me. She'd come into my bedroom and she'd say, no, look, Lois, all of the doctors have said there's nothing wrong with you. You've got to get a grip on yourself, because if you don't, you're going to end up in a hospital, and it's not going to be a normal one. Are you understanding what I'm saying? She'd go out of the room, and I had an oval vanity mirror, and I'd sit and stare at myself, and I'd parrot back these very words. And as soon as I was finished, I'd watch my eyes staring back at me, and I'd say, there is something wrong. I'm not making this up. Another doctor said, your daughter has leg cramps. The symptoms got worse. The pain started every single night I was waking up. By the time I was 17, I was in pain all the time. It was almost as if somebody was taking a wrench inside of me and tightening it. I almost would pass out and see stars. Finally, one day, I just came home and collapsed on the couch. I said, Mom, I can't go on. I'd had to shift all of my weight to the left side of my body, because if I didn't, I would feel this mass just moving inside of me every time I walked, and I was convinced that I had cancer. I didn't tell anybody because I thought nobody would believe me. I thought it was just a matter of time before I was going to die. Finally, when I came home that day, I said, Mom, I can't go on, and I had intense pain. The doctor was called. He pronounced it appendicitis. I was rushed to the hospital, and prepped for an appendectomy, and that's when they found out there was absolutely nothing wrong with the appendix, but that's when they did discover the ileitis at that time.
So from how long?
It was nearly 2 years.
2 years a child suffers like that. What's wrong with your medical profession?
There is something wrong. What's wrong here is that we see the results of doctors, first of all, who don't take somebody seriously. When they don't understand what's going on, they blame the patient. It's all in your head. There's something wrong with you. Get a grip on yourself. And it's because they didn't take her seriously. She was young, and she was a girl, so they didn't take her seriously. But if they listened, the red flags were all there. Fever. Fever's not in your mind. Failure of growth and development. That's not in your mind. A mass moving around. That's not in your mind. So the message is, if the doctors just listen, pay attention, and take it seriously, they can avoid that 2-year gap of unnecessary suffering.
Then we wouldn't have Lois's problem. We're going to come back and start with Marianne. I'm going to ask her what might be an embarrassing question. I'm going to ask her if perhaps this disease isn't brought on by tension, or people who are nervous, or people who are hyper. I mean, could be with all of you.
Good question.
Yeah, let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Did you know that you can make beautiful Afghans like this in less than 45 hours? You can with a simple and inexpensive nitwit. Making an Afghan like this, or this, or even this is easy with the ingenious nitwit. Watch, just wrap the yarn, a few simple stitches, and a twist of the nitwit tool. Now, with Nitwit, your beautiful rosettes pop off already joined. There is no tedious piecing together. With old-fashioned knitting and crocheting, it can take 4 or 5 times as long as Nitwit. Even if you've never made handcraft before, Nitwit is so easy, so much fun, you can be an expert in minutes. Nitwit comes complete with square and round tools, plus illustrated patterns for Afghans, like this colorful, exciting Nitwit Afghan. To make this Afghan, use your square Nitwit pattern. Just wrap the yarn, a few simple stitches, twist, and your handmade craft pops off already joined together. And soon your Knitwit Afghan looks like this. Knitwit comes complete for only $19.95. But wait, if you order now, you'll receive this set of 3 Doodle Loom tools absolutely free. With Doodle Loom, you just wrap the yarn, tie the middle, and snip it off the patented tool. Now you're ready for huggable, fluffy toys like these in just minutes. Doodle Loom tools are great fun at parties, for gift wrapping, Christmas ornaments, or just plain collecting. Your Knitwit and Doodle Loom tools are together for the first time direct from the manufacturer for just $19.95. But hurry, you must call now.
To order your Knitwit, send $19.95 plus $3 postage and handling to Knitwit, P.O. Box 44-H, Stoneham, Massachusetts. That's $19.95 to Knitwit, P.O. Box 44-H, Stoneham, Massachusetts. Or save COD charges and use your Visa or MasterCard and call 1-800-441-5757. That's 1-800-441-5757.
Another beautiful woman in our audience. Would you be so kind?
This is our reigning Miss Connecticut, Marie
Caparel. Very good.
Almost got it out.
As the reigning Miss Connecticut, I gave up my crown on Saturday. I just wanted to make a few, one very special point. What Gary said is very true. It's a disease that nobody talks about. I refer to it as a silent sufferer's disease, and I should know because I've had the disease for the last 8 years, and I am not in remission. I am still very active, and as Miss Connecticut, I've been able to do my job as Miss Connecticut, plus my normal job, plus, everything else. But I was told when I went to Atlantic City, I put on my resume that I wanted to be the national spokesperson for the ileitis and colitis. Well, I was told that, well, what if the judges ask you, well, why do you want to be that? And I said, well, I would tell them that I have the disease. And they looked at me and said, well, don't you think that they would think that you wouldn't be able to do the job as Miss America? And I looked at them and I said, okay, fine, take it off because you want to win. And against my better judgment, we took it off. Well, I went to Atlantic City, and I did not know that Marianne Mobley had the disease. And they feed you constantly while you're there, but they feed you salads, and they feed you fresh fruits and vegetables, things that I can't eat having Crohn's disease. Well, one day I grabbed some grapes, and unfortunately, I had a very severe attack on stage. And I went over to the side lady. I said, can I go use the bathroom? And they said, no, Maria, we can't let you off the stage. And I said, but you don't understand. I have to go use the bathroom. Maria, we can't let you off. Everybody has to stay on stage. I said, well, okay, I'll just go die in the corner. Well, what I did was I curled myself up in a fetal position, and I kind of rocked myself, and the spasm passed in about 15 minutes. But had I known that Marianne had the disease, and had I gone public earlier, I've been public with the disease probably for about the past 4 or 5 months. I've done a lot of promotion for the NFIC. I could have said, Marianne, please tell them to let me go use the bathroom.
Isn't that a lovely story? That's a lovely
Your talent.
Yes, Marianne, you were going to talk to us about tension.
But that's very important. That's why this show, and we thank you for doing this show. But I must say one thing, Sally. The one thing that angers me is when people say stress causes this illness. It does not. It has nothing to do with this illness. Stress will activate anything if you had a heart attack, but it is not the cause. I had a doctor tell me in 1962 to give up show business. The stress of show business was causing my attacks. So don't think, doctors are not infallible. We know very little in 1962, or did know about this disease. We're learning more every day.
I don't think stress helps you when you do have.
No, but if you had a heart attack.
David, what about that?
It's the old problem of blaming the patient again. I mean, again, these aren't diseases that we bring on ourselves by stress or bad. But no matter what chronic disease
while you're all
you've got,
producing a little stress, I'll take a break. We'll be right back.
Okay.
pictures. Hi-ya! He's hot. She's hot.
Hi, fellas.
It's the comedy that's heating up the holidays.
Oh, yeah. Do you like to make love with your boots on?
Get a better traction that way.
Then you keep them on. Can I touch you?
Hell no.
Paul Newman.
I love the man.
Lolita Davidovich. Blaze, rated R.
Now playing at a theater near you. Check newspapers for showtimes.
I can't believe it. I just found I never dreamed anything like this.
What does Artis Eldridge find so unbelievable?
I think it's some kind of a dream.
Artis is the newest millionaire in the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes.
What do you think about your grandma being a millionaire? Isn't that something?
Now Publishers Clearinghouse wants to make you a millionaire. Watch your mail for the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes and send it in right away. On January 26th, maybe you'll say,
This is a day I will never forget.
I like orange juice, but to me it's a bit sweet for the first taste in the morning. So now comes Welch's with this new frozen cranberry orange juice cocktail. The cranberry keeps the orange from tasting too sweet, and the orange keeps the cranberry from tasting too tangy. That's brilliant. But then Welch's has been blending fruit juices for generations. Welch's new cranberry orange. Practice makes perfect.
Look what's coming. Your direct line to all the goods and services you'll ever need. You'll find them in yellow. The new Southwestern Bell Yellow Pages. The one to call on for everything. Local utilities, recreation, where to shop, things to see and do. You name it, you'll find it in yellow. The fingertip facts section in front of your Southwestern Bell Yellow Pages. The one to call on for everything.
Sally, I just want to say one thing before I go home, and that is this. There are a lot of people out there who have suffered from IBD, internal bowel diseases, who end up with this pouch like I have on my waist right now. And I just want them to know that your life, if you're watching, where's the camera, is just beginning, and that you should not restrict your activities, that you are not a changed person.
What do you do about romance?
Don't worry about that.
No,
it doesn't affect. Let me just okay.
That's a normal thing for us to want to know.
It doesn't affect. Same relationships.
That's the key point here, Marvin.
It does not affect.
Marianne has told us how her miracle, how she was able to avoid surgery and be well without surgery. And we've heard some people in the audience who avoided it. But the object is not to avoid surgery. The object is to be well. If you do it without surgery,
there are a lot of people who will not come out of their homes. I get letters every day from people who are ashamed of themselves because they wear a pouch.
I think she's going to answer my question. I can tell. Lois, what do you do?
I put my ostomy surgery off for 2 years. Like you, I lived in a bathroom, and I decided there had to be a better way, even though I was terrified. I had my ostomy surgery nearly 3 years ago. It has been the beginning of my life. I am not in pain. I'm not on medication. I don't hide in bathrooms. I don't constantly think about where a bathroom is. I don't have to make excuses. I can be spontaneous. I can laugh again. And as far as being single and having ileostomy surgery, someone who's extremely important to me, when I told him about it, he said, "It doesn't change who you are inside. It doesn't matter to me, and you won't get rid of me that easily."
This is a Newsline 2451 News Digest.
Coming up on the early edition, the buyout of 32 Fort Smith nursing homes turned sour. We'll have the story. And the economy soars in northwest Arkansas with the second biggest airport in the state. We'll have a report, plus a report on Arkansas's water quality and the effects of our industries on that water. Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Ogle. Join Chris Petty and me for these stories and more, plus Chris Parsons' forecast and Mike Neal with all your sports on the early edition of Newsline 2451 at 6.
This is me, Cindy Atcha, before Nutrisystem. And this is me now. I lost 30 pounds in 3 months, and I feel fabulous. I am going to stay like this the rest of my life. If there's a way I can help one person or 1,000,000 people, I want to tell them, try Nutrisystem, because it does work.
Call Nutrisystems today and lose all the weight you want for just $169.
Start your New Year's celebration early with a New Year's getaway, Saturday, December 30th at the Fifth Season Inn. For as low as $39.95 per couple per night, you can enjoy the luxuries of the indoor swimming pool and sauna, made-to-order complimentary breakfast, full-service restaurant, and more. But remember, this special New Year's rate is for one night only, Saturday, December 30th. Make your New Year's resolution at the Fifth Season Inn, just off Rogers Avenue near I-540 in Fort Smith.
Stay out! Don't you move. Mommy'll be right back.
Give your cat a break. Child-proof your home.
For a transcript of this program, send $3 to Transcripts, Sally Jessy Rafael, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007, or call 212-227-READ.
Yeah, right.
Can I thank those of you in the audience? You know, there are days when we can go home and say, gee, we really learned something and we really feel good about ourselves. And I think it's because of the glorious panel. You couldn't ask for a better group of people. Thank you.
Some members of our audience will receive, and a promotional fee has been provided by
Advanced Formula Centrum, a high-potency, multivitamin, multi-mineral formula with beta-carotene. Centrum, more complete from A to zinc.
The Presto Salad Shooter Slicer Shredder. Point and shoot wherever you want it. To clean, just rinse and wipe. Store anywhere. The Presto Salad Shooter.
Yes, I am the Muffin Man. Now I am the Butter Man.
Imperial. Only our taste deserves the crown.
Making a curved cut with this circular saw. Here, let me run it by you one more time. The Delta Miracle Blade is making this curved cut. How about that? This is it. Cuts frontwards, backwards, and sideways. The saw blade is completely free of your work 3 times each revolution, thousands of times per minute. That's why it works. It's easy to make rounded